Welcome to the 1-point perspective drawing tutorial. This video will undertake a quick sort of beginner perspective drawing and look at where it's used within the design industry, along with what digital programs you can use to create the 1-point perspective drawing method. What we're going to undertake is not this drawing, but look at this drawing method in terms of its utilizing the 1-point perspective drawing method, where it's creating that illusion of depth within the space. I've quickly drawn this little guide to assist with understanding the 1-point perspective method. So as you can see within that space, the verticals, being the blue lines, they remain vertical. The horizontal lines, being the green, they remain horizontal. So the drawing method is always drawn front on and not side on. So the viewer is parallel, in this case, to the back wall. So they're always front on. Then the depth is created with the red lines. And so that's where we're creating the illusion and where the name comes from, 1-point perspective. So if we draw a line to where all these red lines recede to, being the depth, we can see that's that point, and that's what we consider to be the 1 point or the vanishing point within 1-point perspective. Why is it often used in environmental design is we often enter a room, the center of the room, or at least be parallel to the back wall. So that's why it works really effectively in interiors. Drawing exteriors, you'll often be doing 2-point perspective, which I'll make a video for that later. First of all, you're going to need a piece of paper. I've just got an A3 piece here, just for the video sort of size, but using A4, that's going to be more than suitable. You can see I've just drawn a horizontal line along there, and that's what we call our horizon line. So obviously anything below it is on the ground plane. In this case, anything above it was within the space or the sky. And then along the horizon line, you need to include a mark. So that's what the vanishing point's going to recede to. And so that's the equivalent, going to be the equivalent of this dot here within our previous design. So make sure you put the vanishing point. It needs to be on the horizon line. It doesn't have to be centered. In this case, for this drawing, it's going to be best if it's located about there. I am now going to draw a shape in here. As I said, it needs to be front on, not taken from a side angle. And so you might want to use a set square. These are really handy just to make sure your lines, the vertical lines you're doing, are perpendicular or right angle to your horizon line. So if you want to do a straight line there, you can go through and draw a straight line. The equipment I'm using is quite a dark pencil. If I was undertaking, I suggest when you're undertaking it, you're using something with a H rather than a B in the title. So this is a 2B, just to make sure it's nice and clear on the video, but otherwise a 4H, 2H is going to be really good. And then we'll go through and render it using a 6B. An eraser is also really handy, and a ruler. 30 to sort of 40 centimeters in length. I'm just going to use this plastic one now. So I'm going to draw 5 shapes, 2 above the horizon line, 2 below the horizon line, and 1 on the horizon line. Please make sure you use a ruler. And with the 5 shapes, it's going to be best if one incorporates some sort of arc and another one has at least a diagonal sort of line within it. I'm going to quickly pause it. I'll complete the other shapes, and then we'll continue. So we're back. I've just completed the 5 shapes. So I've got obviously 2 shapes above the horizon line, 2 shapes below the horizon line, 1 shape on the horizon line. I've included a diagonal. I've included some sort of arcs or curves, and the shapes aren't just, there's at least 4 or 5, 6 different edges on each one, so they're not too simple and common. there's a little bit more complexity to them. So, you know, please go through and try and incorporate that into it. The next step now is to incorporate obviously we have our height being shown in each case. So first dimension, second dimension, the length with each one. And now we need to provide some depth to these so they become forms. Okay, at the moment we consider these shapes because they're just very two-dimensional. When we start to depict and recede depth, that's when they becoming three-dimensional forms. Before I get started with drawing that, there's a really good program called Sketchbook, and so you can just complete drawings. But what feature it has that's really strong is you can go into 1-point perspective, 2-point perspectives, and 3-point perspectives. And so, as you can see from the drawing before, you can move the perspective around and its intensity, but then whenever you start drawing, it will naturally, oops, go back, draw one out there. It should automatically go along the line, which you can then also rotate. So that's called Sketchbook by Autodesk. So let's begin. Once again, I'd be using your 2H pencil, especially at this step. Keep them really super light, really sharp pencil, and because you're going to be erasing a lot of sort of construction lines or guidelines. I'm going to begin with this shape that I started before, and with our image, you're only going to be projecting back or receding lines back wherever there is going to be an edge. So I first of all identify where all the edges are. Even at the top here, but what we're going to determine is that these forms are sort of concrete forms. They're not translucent, so there won't necessarily be a line receding back at the from this back side. And wherever you might find when you're drawing it that when you're receding the forms, it might clash or connect with another form. Obviously, just let it end there. So here, to recede, obviously, and depict the 1-point perspective, you select placing your ruler wherever it intersects with one of the corners and wherever it aligns with the vanishing point, and then you're drawing a line back to the edge. Obviously, it's going to hit there, so I'm not going to worry about projecting it any further. So next one, projecting it back. There's not going to be any point putting one in there. And keep these lines very light because you're going to be erasing a hell of a lot of it. Might do this one over here, and then same thing, I'll pause the video, complete it, and then we'll move on to the next stage. Wherever there's an edge, you're lining up the edge with the vanishing point. The only thing to take note is probably leave the curves until the end. Obviously there's only going to be an edge in the middle there, wherever that fold is, and then at the end of it as well. So leave that to last. And we're back, we've completed that. So we've now depicted the depth, so that depth always recedes back to the vanishing point. I just want to reiterate that there's no point continuing these lines any further and having it clash with that, because it's just going to cause confusion. So you can see I haven't completed the line fully there, even within this block here, because we're saying this is a solid front block located over here, and I've just left this last line. So wherever there's an arc, it's only wherever there's an edge that you're going to be receding back the depth. So I'll place, same thing, just to finalize it, from the vanishing point, wherever it aligns with the top of that form. That's where you're going to have the depth. The next step is now determining how much depth and how thick each individual shape is going to be. So let's get started. We always started with this one, so why stop? So I'm going to say we want it to be roughly about that thick. This one here, we might make it a little bit thicker. So we want it to be around about that thick. So first of all, determine how thick you want the form to be. And then the only other thing you're doing is replicating or copying whatever the angle is that's on that same face. So here, it's running vertically. And so I'm just going to pull the ruler back and draw a vertical line there. And then same thing along the bottom, that bottom face. Pull it out, it's going to be horizontal. And then we need to work out this thickness, which you can always just measure now that it's 18 mil. So from that point, I can go out 18 mil. And that's actually going to be right there. So either measure the distance or just replicate wherever there's an edge. So I'll continue to do the same thing. Oops, our video's changing a little bit. Fill in the depth for each one, just determine them at different depths, and then we'll start rendering and finishing it off. And our final design, then we'll move on into 2-point perspective. And so you can see, obviously, these faces are all similar. They're not capturing much light at all, so a really dark sort of shadow consistency. And then you got your mid-tones for all the walls. Obviously, this should sort of be in between the wall side and the flat top in terms of its colouring. And as I mentioned before, with the arc that comes around, the top's going to be lighter because it's capturing a bit more light, and then they're gradually transitioning to the side where it's going to have that nice transition there. So that's 1-point perspective. Thank you.